Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Let's welcome today's speaker, Allison.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Allison. I'm an alcoholic. Wow. God, I'm just so humbled by this meeting. The enthusiasm and the service and the level of commitment and dedication and just the fun about it all, I just am blown away. I can't tell you how lovely it is. And I love the honesty that was shared. It's profound. I just can't stand it. I would have hated this meeting when I was new. I just would have run out of the door setting my hair on fire and stabbing myself with hot pokers. But I'm just so profoundly grateful that I get to be here now and not do that. God, welcome if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous. I just invite you to get right in the middle of this thing. You know, all those people that stood up here when he was announcing the service commitments and H&I and all of those trusted servants, just get right in the middle of this thing. Get a sponsor that's louder than your head, and that says the hard things to you. I loved the honesty of the people that were taking cakes. It's funny because I tell that, alcoholism is a very isolating disease, and I've come to understand that it's that terminal uniqueness and that place of ego and defective character and all that stuff that it talks about in the big book. And early on in the big book, they talk about the obsession of the mind, and they don't say with alcohol. They just talk about the obsession of the mind, and then it gets coupled with the phenomena of craving. And, that part, although I get to live by spiritual principles, hopefully every day, and I get to have this, rock'em sock'em life, that piece doesn't go away. I woke up this morning, I have ways to address it, but I woke up this morning and, I never suffered from what it is that you think of me. I heard people talk a lot about, I was so afraid of what people thought of me. I've already decided what you thought of me. And then I go act on that. That's the problem. And I was driving down here, I live in Santa Barbara, and I was, it's I've had the good fortune and blessing of being able to speak around, right? And there was a long time in my sobriety and in my sober story where it was I didn't notice the eye rollers. I didn't notice the people that had an opinion or a judgment about what I had to say because I was too self-centered. I didn't care, And then I got to this place in the last few years where I started to notice that. I started to pay really close attention to it and decide what they were doing. It didn't matter that maybe they just had contacts in and were blinking, their eye. No, it was about me. And the 4 horsemen that they talk about in the big book, and if you're new, I'd like you to, seek it out, look it up, ask your sponsor, read about it. The 4 horsemen is what they're talking about when they're talking about waking up sober. We're not talking about the 4 horsemen when you're drunk. When I was drunk, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I didn't care. You got in my way. That was the only problem I had drinking, ever. When I woke up stone cold sober and I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, all that stuff came back, that conversation in my head. The thing that sets me apart from you. If there is spiritual malady at the root of this deal, it's because I'm separate. I separate myself from you. I'm not like you. I'm not connected to you. There is no God. I'm alone, and that's never going to change. And unfortunately, I'm going to blot out my existence like that. I'm just going to blot out my existence like that. or I'm going to accept spiritual help, spiritual remedy. Talks a lot, the words in the big book are really helpful to me because I started to look them up and understand the distinction. Remedy is a solution, it's a cure. That's the definition. And what happens is I drove down here, and I was calling people and getting outside of myself, and I want to thank Ed and John for having me come here. I'm really grateful to have this experience with you, and my good friend Lori, that I get to walk this journey with. And I was driving down, and I was thinking I was trying to get out of self, making phone calls, and so that it wasn't about me, and that, hopefully I could show up and just ask God to speak through me, and for our hearts to be prepared for the conversation we're going to have today, and just roll through it. And then I get to this meeting, and like you guys shared honestly, and those people that have time and those people that are new talked about the feelings and that I'm connected to you again. I'm right here with you. I'm connected to you. And God speaks to me through those means. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous the first time when I was 13. I was introduced to AA, and I had earned my seat. I am a hope-to-die alcoholic. I do whatever I have to do to get alcohol and other mind-altering substances that I like to shoot in my neck. And I do whatever I have to do to get it. And I was introduced through an institution. It was the first institution I had ever been in. It was not the last. And I wanted to get off the lockdown unit. That's why I went to the meeting. I just wanted to get off the lockdown unit. And we are very smart. It's like if we can find a way around the system, we're going to find it. And so I remember sitting in there, and I had all the diagnoses, the litany of things that were wrong with me. And the truth is that, aptly so, it was a lot of them were true. But I don't know anybody that's coming off of cocaine and alcohol that's not bipolar. Like multiple personality disorder, onset schizophrenia from the drugs that I was doing. Like, come on, especially when you're like 11 and developing, you're going to be a bubble off center, boop. And I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in that institution. I went down to the meeting, and this lady, I had never had an experience or exposure to you, but this lady was sitting there, and it's so funny to me now because I'm sure she was younger than I am now, and she was so old, and I just thought, she is tore up, and if that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer, it's like, I think she was probably in her 30s, and not a vision for you as far as I was concerned, But then she got, she said those things that you guys say. It's the language of the heart. It's that soul-moving stuff. It's that connection that I couldn't get any other way. I thought I had found that in alcohol. I thought I had filled the hole, And she said that stuff, and she talked about being a fallen woman and living on the streets and doing the stuff that I was doing, and she talked about the feelings, and that was something that I related to. It was that I'm the kind that's terrified of everything and afraid of nothing, It's like I can't go to the bathroom during a meeting because you'll look at me, but I will fist fight a man in the parking lot, that I'm not dating, and or maybe that I am. Nothing was proportional, it was always like disproportional, and I could never get to center, and I could never it was one extreme or the other, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of stuff that it talks about. And she asked me to start reading the big book in that institution, and I did, and I started to identify, and it was so... She asked me to look at it because I was so young from the perspective of the feelings, start to pay attention to what they say. How do they feel? Are they terrified of everything and afraid of nothing? Is their life run on the premise of trying to get outside of themselves? I wanted to take my skin off and go to skinless town. I just couldn't be in my skin, distract it and run like a baby wolf. I could not live in this. And And she said, just start reading the big book, read Bill Wilson's story, and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to identify with being a stockbroker or proctologist at 13, but like, but I might identify with like just trying to get outside of me and those decisions that I kept making. And that, the demoralization was always pretty powerful. Like I would watch people in meetings talking about that, the incomprehensible demoralization. And certainly I experienced that as the result of my drinking, that it was very tangible. That was touchy-feely. There was texture to that. But over time, I started to understand truly and really the demoralization that I created for other people. Like, that was the point at which things started to shift in me. And so I come from a family of, like, we're French, we're Italian, and we drink, and we eat, and we fight, and we love, it's just like this big mess. And there was a lot of that stuff that I could easily, in that family, I could easily go, see, this is why. Like, my father drowned in Lake Tahoe because he was drunk when I was a little girl, and my siblings were alcoholics and addicts and well into their disease, and all of their friends passed me around between them. And, I lived on the streets, and really bad stuff happens to little girls on the streets, and I could easily go, this is it, checklist. This is why I'm like this. This is the psychosis. But none of what I did in my drinking was proportional to the stuff that happened to me. All the stuff that I did out of self was totally outside of the scope of the stuff that happened to me. It was so far beyond, and my thinking was so far beyond, that just gave it that extra little special, kick in the pants that I needed of victimhood. And I'm so grateful that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16 and I got sober and I got to stay from there, that nobody allowed me to stay in that place, because I would have died. And I'm the kind of person that I'll take you with me, like I become a victim, you become my problem, and things are going down. I get afraid, I get very angry, and other people like go into their closet and hide, not me. And, I'm like, and just waiting for that fear to come out. So I ended up inevitably, because nothing changed. It's like the alcohol was removed and nothing supplanted that. There was no sufficient substitute for it. The wind blowing through it, and then this mind, the obsession of this mind, you're against me, I'm a little different, why are you looking at me like that? Why are you talking about, like just these things, or the judgments, we can see it for those of you that have time, you get in a business meeting and they're doing it wrong, it's like those little incremental things that start to supplant principle and take over, right? And when I was new at that time, I didn't have any of that. I didn't even have that, to fill it. So, what inevitably happened is, of course, I drank, and I did, I just had more yets. Like, for me, all the bottoms were the same. Like, I didn't know anybody that was on the streets at 12, 13, 14. Like, I didn't know anybody doing the stuff that I was doing. I was running drugs for the Mexican mafia. Like, I didn't know anybody my age doing that stuff, and in the middle of that. And so it wasn't like it got worse. It just was another, spiral into the seventh in of hell. Like, hopeless is hopeless. Like, you don't have to put more on it, like dress that pig up. Like, it's just hopeless, So none of that changed. And I was like punk rock. I remember being little, like it was in the 70s, and I think I might have been like 7 or whatever, and I saw something about the Sex Pistols, and I saw the chick from Missing Persons, and she was like, she'd wear the see-through top and the purple hair, and then there was Nancy and Sid, and I was like, I want to live in Chelsea and get stabbed, like it was like my aspirations, like, and then I found out the chick from Missing Persons was a playmate or something, and I was like, yes, like I'm gonna grow up to be this, and I aspired to be many things. And, and it wasn't a reflection. My family is like, I was well suited to go many places if I had the drevas. But I didn't. I wanted to do what I wanted. Was the bottom line. And so I was punk rock, and I lived all over the United States, and I totally thought I was like artsy and Mensa, I was just homeless all over the continental United States, until somebody would be like, "You have to go." And I went on one of the big last benders, and I ended up kind of hopping towards my siblings. I have 3 other siblings, and they're older than I am. I'm the youngest, and in age, but not in sobriety. We're all sober today, and the youngest of us in sobriety is my brother, and he just turned 25 years sober. And so I every single house I'd end up in, they'd go, you've got to go. And I didn't know that everybody was calling my mom. It was always the mom. I always loved hearing the tough guys talk about mama. It's like, I will be so tough and shank you on the yard, but I'm going to go home to mama because she's going to give me money, and that was my story too. It wasn't any different, My mom was a consummate codependent and in a family full of alcoholics, and everybody said, you have to go, and even the drinkers wouldn't drink with me at that point. And so I got on a plane and I came back to Indianapolis, which is where my mom was, and I got off the plane, promptly slit my wrist, OD'd, and died. And I woke up out of a coma 4 days later. I just turned 16, and I had lost motor function. I had that kind of I'd go to talk to a nurse, and I'd go, bleh, and they'd be like, awesome. They don't like it when we do that stuff. They were just, what a waste. And I saw my mom's face. And I don't know why that was that point where I really got it, but I saw what I had done to her again. She had 2 life insurance policies on me to pay for my funeral. She knew she couldn't save me. She knew there wasn't any hope. She had gotten to that place. And the courts were done. I was facing being institutionalized for a long time. I'm one of those that does some pretty gnarly stuff when I'm on the run and doing all that stuff. And there was a lady that intervened, and she had seen my family off and on during the years and done therapy, and she was so smart. She knew the only thing that could save me was you. And she said, you have to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have to see me 3 times a week. And I think the 3 times a week was to stand between me and the courts, really, honestly. She didn't even really try to do psychology on me. She said, eventually you're going to have to deal with all that stuff that you did, all the stuff that happened to you, and all of these things that were family of origin issues, and you're going to have to face that. But if you don't deal with your alcoholism first, none of it matters, not even a little bit. And so I was grateful that I learned to sort of compartmentalize that, because it's hard. And I'm not making a statement here, I'm talking about my story. With therapy, and I do plenty of it, trust me, I with the foundation of the life that I had, it's not like you can have intimate, loving, personal, interpersonal relationships. It was like I had to learn that process, and it was going to be a long road, steps as principles and a foundation, but getting through some of that stuff. And so she said, here's what you're going to have to do. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really detoxed in the rooms. I spent a lot of time here shaking, rattling, and rolling. They had candy on the table, and everybody smoked, and I love walking into a meeting in that film. It was like flying into LA. It's just that film. It's just dirty. I just loved it. And double fisted. I was up to 4.5 packs a day at one point, and double fisting coffee at the same time with cigarettes. And I sit in the meeting, and the old timers, they were, it's such a different time now, and I love it. We evolve. The things that people would have said to me and did say to me when I was new, I would never say to a newcomer now, it's just different. It's a different time, but I'm so grateful that they did say what they said to me, and they would say things like, we've had our fill of sickness, thanks, my first sponsor told me that I had to read the big book on the toilet because it was the only place I was humble, and plug in the jug sobriety, you know, it was just, but it was great. And I wasn't, nobody said like, hey, you think you can spare some time to go to this H&I commitment? You know, they were like, get in the car. And I just was like, oh, okay. And not like, I mean, I had a lot of fight and resistance to all of that, but it was that hopelessness. It wasn't just desperation. Like one of, as I don't like to name drop, but anyway, somebody shares often that, you know, it's not the desperation, it's when we're at hopeless and then we get sober and we get the desperation, you know, and thank God for that. And so it was like unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to my ego, and despite all of those things, I did what you asked me to do, even with the fight, you know. And so women would say you have to go to women's meetings because you are one, you know, like, I know you don't know that yet, but you are, you know, and don't bend over in front of their husband anymore. And, you know, just, I mean, it was just ridiculous, you know, but I had to learn that stuff. They'd take me grocery shopping and be like, don't say that, you know, don't do that to that nice lady. And it was a long progression for me. God bless you if you clean up fast. I just marvel at that, like a moth to the flame. I'm like, oh my God, they're pretty and shiny. That's not how I was. Like, it took a long time to get okay. And in the beginning, because I was still detoxing and I had done some real damage with the what I had OD'd on, I'll just say 7 could have killed me, and I took 35. And because my brain was not okay, I was detoxing from alcohol and all of that stuff. I had audio-visual hallucinations. There was a lot of love and tolerance in Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody was like, oh, there, she's drunk, you know, or she's crazy, or, you know, I mean, I always saw clothing lines and cows. I don't know. And I would see a clothing line coming at my head in a meeting, and I'd hit the floor, you know, and they just like, it's okay, you know. And I'd get back up, and I did that. They'd say go to hospitals and institutions because that's where I came from. And I was repeatedly institutionalized in my early sobriety over and over and over again. And, you know, just I couldn't get, like, here's a way of living and here's principles, and spiritual way of living. I was an agnostic when I came here, and I was agnostic for the first 7 years of my sobriety. And, you know, it was a hard balance. And that little mommy of mine, you know, I didn't tell you the litany of things that happened in that family, but you could probably guess if I was on the streets at 11 and 12 and 13. But, you know, that damage that happened, and I was 2 years sober, and I tried to kill her, and I was a year sober, and I got caught, and I was institutionalized for that. And, you know, how do you make amends for that? How do you do that, you know? And I'd get out of the institution, I'd come back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd show up, and I go, I don't know how to do this differently. I don't know how to not put my hands on people. I don't know how to not be afraid, which is at the root of it, you know? I don't know how to not be afraid and therefore not resentful at you. Today, that stuff manifests in don't send that email, you know? Don't Facebook that. Gentler, much more gentle. But, you know, it's those things that I have to check, you know, those defects of character are still there, you know? Having trouble in my personal relationships. Why? Right? Sex relationships are typically troublesome. I love that in the big book it defines all these different areas of our life. Employment, they have a chapter to the employers for a reason, you know. It's not just because we might be getting sober, you know. It's like because defect is there, spiritual malady is there, irrespective of whether or not alcohol is a part of it, you know. So I had to address all these things, and slowly but surely I did. And I got a sponsor. Her name was Mary Shields Gordon, and she, you know, I'd asked 5 other women to sponsor me, and all of them said no. And I thought, that's unheard of, you know. I'm a delicate flower, you know. Not so much, you know. I was packing all the time. And punk rock and dirty. I had a lot of friends that were like, why do you still have your teeth? I'm not really clear about that. They were bitter. And I went to her. She was my last resort, and I just, she said the truth to me every time I saw her, and I hated her for it. It was just like, it wasn't even brutal truth. It was just like delivery of just a little truth sandwich, and I just hated it. And she was elegant and eloquent, and she floated and lilted through her life, and I hated that. I've gotten all my sponsors like that. I just hate you. And I went to her and I said, I am ready. I had done some step work, and it was mostly like if they hadn't, I wouldn't have, And I went to her. I was 2 years sober, and I said, I'm ready, and nobody else will sponsor me. And she said, I've been waiting for you. She has a daughter who was 20 at the time and is now, she got sober very young like I did, and she's now about to turn 40 years sober, and my sponsor is over 50 years, Mary Shields is over 50 years sober or more, and it was life-changing. And she was the person that I sat and did the third step. I really got the third step. I was clear that I was powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. My story was indicative. It wasn't like I had to seek that or write that. Like, my story was indicative of unmanageability. It was very clear to me. Powerless, I was clear that I had been, pounding on the bar. How did I get here again? And, I couldn't not drink. I was very clear about that. Physically, I couldn't not. I would have died. And, but that second piece, that something bigger than me could restore me to sanity, I didn't believe it. People hurt me. And if you're associated with God and you hurt people. And it wasn't even like religious. I went to Catholic school. I wasn't mad at that. I didn't have any, it just didn't connect. Nothing resonated. It was just this, banal, like, just doldrum. There was no way to connect. And I'd lay on her couch and I'd go, I see it. I see the sparkly little thing. All those people standing up here that were talking about being of service, they all had that sparkly thing that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. The magic here that happens, their little eyes are twinkling. H&I panel, twinkle, like, pass the basket, twinkle, twinkle. It just, like, and I could see it. I saw it in you, and I'd lay on her couch 3-4 years sober, and I go, I see it, man, and I'm going to die of this disease. I know it. I'm going to die without that. I'm never going to connect to that. And she said, believe that I believe. Do what I ask you to do and do what I do. I'll never ask you to do anything I haven't done. And believe what I believe. And believe in what I believe in for a while. And so I'd pray to Mary Shields' God, like, this is exhausting, Mary Shields' God. I think in the beginning it was definitely pinch hitter kind of stuff, but this is a spiritual program. If you get freaked out by the God thing, like, that's totally okay. Like, what better forum can you say, like, fuck and God in the same sentence? I don't know any place else that you can do that, and if you're pissed, this is a place to be. Like, you're mad at God, you don't believe in God, great place to be, what better place? So I was so grateful for that, and so I did what she asked me to do, and a lot of it was action. Like, I just got into action. She asked me to do something, I went to the institutions because I related to that. She asked me to be of service here, I was of service here. She asked me to do this, I did that, And the truth is, none of that's changed. Like, all these years, I just have, done what they've asked me to do. They say, get in the car, I get in the car. It's not different. My sobriety is April 9th, 1989. It's never changed from here. All of that's the same. Now, I've had a lot of wonderful life experiences. Like, I loved what one of the gentlemen shared. It's like, my sobriety hasn't been easy. I always marvel at the people that have easy sobriety. I think it's lovely. Like, I just admire it. And I think it's beautiful. And I'm really grateful because they're a good example of, like, a level of serenity or peace or joy. Like, I struggle with joy. I like, it's a foreign thing, like, deeply depressed, and but I just had, that's not my experience, it's like I've had to learn to live these principles in every area of my life, and it's never like in this, like, go quietly into the night way, it's always just like boom, boom, you know, like, here's a defect, gonna burn through a bunch of marriages, go bankrupt, you know, get different. I mean, it's just never ending. And I always loved when people would share when I got sober, like these, you know, gnarly stories of getting sober because they did their whole life, you know, big chunk of their life drinking. They spent 30, 40 years drinking. It's different when you've spent your entire life in sobriety. Most of my life has now been in sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous. So all the stuff you all talked about in your drinking, I've had to do right here in these rooms, you know, and stay sober anyway and be able to learn through principle how this is going to be different, you know, what am I going to do differently, and do inventory and take responsibility and make amends. And I take that part seriously. I was mean to some guy at a Target like a month ago, and I had to call and apologize. Like, and I said that to a sponsee, and she was like, this is just a Target guy. And I was like, I'll die of alcoholism. Like, amends aren't selective to certain people. Like, if you act like a jackass, you have to take a responsibility for that. And so I did, and I'm not sharing that because I'm proud of it, or to share it's like we don't get brownie badges for that stuff. Alcoholics think we do. We're like, I'd like to accept the Academy Award for my amends, you know. Or we judge how someone does amends. That's my favorite. Like, we're all judgy about it. It's not an amends. But whatever. But like, you know, phases of growth. And I think that's probably it for the share. Yes. Thank you so much for letting me share.
How is it like being in a sober marriage and having children? Tell me about what it's like now with that.
Oh my gosh. So, Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So John asked, how is it like being in a sober marriage with children, and what's it like now? Is that accurate? So my husband and I have been together, and we're both in Alcoholics Anonymous. We've been together for 10 years. We have 2 boys. One is from a previous relationship of mine. And it has been arduous and challenging and beautiful and painful and joy-filled, and we've had to work harder programs, I think, than I've ever had to work. And my connection with God has been deeper because of that, and my connection with another human being is the first connection I've ever had at that depth. And we've gotten to, like I have shared with him, we've talked often about the fact that our children are being raised in an alcoholic home. It's a sober alcoholic home with principles, but it's an alcoholic home. The way that we think is off. It just is. Now, I'm not saying if it doesn't get better, there's no point in doing this, right? So it gets better, and it always, the one truth that it's a constant is that it's dynamic. It's going to change. This too shall pass. But we have to work really hard, and we've had a lot of challenges, in particular our oldest son. And I don't know if he's going to end up here, you know, but I am so glad that you guys are here to preserve this thing.
Hello. How did you walk through the hallucinations and the delusions?
I love the word delusion because it's... Oh, yes, I forget. How did you walk through the hallucinations and the delusions? Other people walked me through that. That's just the truth, is that I really couldn't differentiate. And it wasn't just the true from the false as it's described in the big book of, like, you know, being able to look at ourselves and take ownership. There was a lot of time that I couldn't differentiate literally that there was something wrong with the way I was seeing the world and other people, and just trusting in that, and then trusting in the process, which inevitably led me back to a power greater than myself, you know. I did a bunch of other work too.
How did you make amends to your mom and dad?
My father had passed away, so I did write a letter, even though he was I was 8 when he passed away. I did write a letter because there was a lot of blame about him and his stuff. And I had to finally take responsibility for the way that I lived my life thereafter. You know, it's that distinction of it wasn't my fault what happened to me as a little kid or a child, but what I did with all of that, I had to take ownership with. So I did that. And then with my mom, I flew back at 2 years sober and made face-to-face amends to her and owned it, all of it, the trying to kill her, all of it. And it took us about 10 years to heal. And my mom, I just share this really quickly. My mom ended up going back to school, and she's been in Al-Anon for 30 plus years, and she went back to school in the time of all of our recovery and sobriety, and she specialized in a specific field in social work and advocated for children. And my son, our oldest son, who's now 14, ended up with all the same things that she specialized in, not having known that that was coming. You know, I mean, that, you know, it's like timelines. You know, she went back 30 years ago, and he's 14. So that was God. That was clearly God. So it's been healed. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Do you think you were ever like addicted in your recovery to like drama and chaos as you were getting through your early sobriety? Did drama and chaos feel like I'm still stuck on that? Not that I have experience with it.
Yes, thank you. The question was, do you feel like you were addicted in sobriety? Okay, so to drama and chaos. And I love that question because when I was new, people didn't talk about being hooked on the lifestyle. And part of that lifestyle was this pervasive, dangerous theme, and that I was always in danger. The flight or fight was just as addictive to me as the other, to fill the, you know. And frankly, I drank a lot to, like, quiet that, you know, so that I could function in it. It wasn't like remove myself, it was function in it. And so, yes, stark reality of having that removed and then having to address that. And anger has been like that for me. It's a fallback of like, ooh, you know. And it's funny, my sponsor said to me one time, we were working on something, but it was something in my life that I was, you know, a professional thing or whatever. And I said, I'm terrified and, you know, I'm afraid of the anger that comes with that. And she said, you could just be excited. It feels the same. I was all, that's profound, mind blown, you know, but it's true. Sorry.
In relationship to your anger and your fear, can you talk to a little bit about your packing and knives?
The question was in relationship to your anger and fear. Could you talk a little bit about packing and knives? Yeah, it took me about 5 years to let go of that. I was weaponed up for a long time, and it, you know, I mean, that's the most what I started to have to look at in dealing with fear was, where is God in this? And I started to have to look at, what am I identifying as God? I had a Santa Claus God a lot, you know, that you like, give me this and this will happen, you know, kind of ideology. It never occurred to me until I was willing to look at that piece, do work, that my relationship with God was about a solace, a safe place, a hiding place with God, not some outward thing that was going to prevent bad circumstances. And so how do I live in life? Because stuff happens. Like, we've had every health scare and financial things and all that, like, life happens. So how do I live in that with a trust and reliance on something that's not going to get me out of this one? And that was part of the turning point where I started to let go of that stuff, you know. Is that it? Okay, thank you so much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control. Up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.